So thank you both, and Simra, if you'd like to join us, it's I think it's been an absolute privilege to have you both here. But of course, you're not at the woods yet. There's lots of questions waiting, and so I'll start going through them now in order of votes. And the first one comes from Ila Burtel, and the question reads: have any group work therapy approaches been tried to work through and resolve post-traumatic stress issues suffered by survivors? If so, how successful has this approach been? And I think that, either of you are welcome to answer this one, both of you.
When I've tried to start formal groups, so we're going to run a group, we're inviting survivors to come, the uptake isn't that great. So what I've actually done, which isn't pure therapeutic group work, is using the social situations, social groups that we run, and then they have lunch or tea or there's a break, and I actually don't put myself into that group as a therapist, as a counselor. I'm part of the group, and they start talking among themselves, and it is so valuable, because we're not, I think Amparo used that expression, we call it something else. So we're having a chat, and it's amazing what they can give each other. And now and then I kind of nudge in a little bit to steer something in a direction that seems to be valuable. So I wish I could answer yes, we've run these amazing groups with beautiful outcomes, but I believe the outcomes from these little informal groups have value.
Yes, I would say similar for us.
Amparo?
Similar. So we've had different people come to the groups and bring different interventions, various degrees of success. What stands out, the most important thing about the group intervention is normalization. Is hearing that story from other mouths, to see I'm not alone, this happens to other people, to not feel judged, I think. And the connections, the social connections that they can make at the group, that they can carry out in real life, because a lot of these people have quite a lot of difficulty making friends, maintaining friendship, because their symptoms are embarrassing to them, because they can't trust themselves in social situations. So it's so important for them to create social connections with people that understand that can respect it. Otherwise, they're just stay at home thinking, I can't go to that party because if there's noise, I might start screaming and everyone is going to think I'm crazy. And that happens so often for them.
Thank you. We'll move on to the second question from April Dowling. There seems to be a huge overlap between best practice support for those living with dementia and trauma-informed approach. Could either of you comment on how these two fields are progressing in relation to each other?
Yes, there is. And I think what Simra was talking about, when traumatized clients who've gone through all these awful things, get dementia, the impact of, the way it traumatizes the whole family, because they don't know, often they don't know what parents have gone through. The problem with hospitals and different professionals not understanding what's trauma and what is dementia, like your client, Simra, that was almost diagnosed with psychosis, but it's trauma. So there is a lot in there that we need to learn more about it. We need more examples. We need to talk to more people, because I observe a lot of our clients are lost in the cracks, because professionals tend to be, I work with dementia or I work with trauma. But then here we have a intersection between those two factors. That is quite special, it's unique.
Simran, any
Well,
thoughts on this?
It's a bit of a side answer to this question, but it's just a whole new level of trauma for the person living with dementia when they're re-traumatized through whatever reason triggers in the environment, because they're going through the trauma they went through earlier as though they're going through it's their reality, and it's so painful to watch.
Yes, yeah, it's all very present. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's take on the next question, which is to you, Amparo. Would it help trauma survivors with different experiences and maybe different cultural backgrounds to share their traumatic experiences? I imagine we're talking about older
yes,
trauma survivors.
I think it does. I think it does. And what I find with the clients, the elderly clients that I work with, they really appreciate opportunities to talk about what's happened to them because they don't feel very hurt. Their stories are quite uncool in the community. People don't want to hear what happened to them. It's ugly, it's sad, it brings everyone down. So they don't have a lot of platforms to talk about it. And it is quite healing for them. Also, their experiences have made them feel invisible, unimportant, irrelevant. And when someone says, I want to hear your story is going to help other people, they really appreciate that. It helps them, I think.
Can I give you an example of, it's not exactly answering this, but I think it's a valuable story. So the lady who was woken up in the hospital with a torch, she was a very engaging, tall lady. And she had this thing to give herself meaning in her life, to bear witness. She wanted people to know that she went through the Holocaust, that it happened. So she had from Auschwitz the numbers tattooed on her arm. So whenever she went anywhere and there were kids with tattoos, she would ask them about their tattoos. And because she was so engaging, she was a handsome woman, not pretty, handsome, they always responded to her, and I actually witnessed this. And then she would say, can I tell you about my tattoo? And I think, so what I'm trying to say, so this is a vastly different lot of people that she was talking to. But if you have a whole lot of people or a group of people with different backgrounds, different experience, who are willing to listen to you, and to actually almost bear witness to what you went through, I think that's quite healing. It gives meaning and it gets it out of you anyway.
Exactly. Especially when they know that the information that you're collecting from them is going to help services understand how to look after people better, how to make things better for everyone. So they can really see a use in their sharing and they can see how it helps others. It's meaningful.
Thank you. Let's move on to the next one now, which follows on from Ilya's question before about groups. And it reads, have you experienced art therapy as an approach offered? If so, what responses have you received from your clients?
Sorry, was it to do with art, did you say?
Yes, whether you've used art therapy as an approach, and if so, how did the clients respond to it?
So I had a manager years ago who was an art therapist and a social worker, and she did some amazing work, both with survivors, but also with people living with dementia. And it was during Refugee Week, we managed to get an exhibition at Bondi Beach. And we also got school students to display their art to do with the Holocaust. And we had Russian refugees displaying their work. So it was a whole variety of people. And just what struck me was, especially the students' work, you could have cried buckets. It was so sad. The survivors' work, for the most part, was so cheerful and so bright. I couldn't understand it. And then I had a client who was the most almost self-tortured man in his thoughts, in his memories, hugely intelligent man and very artistic. And his paintings were torturous, and he put 6 red dots of blood in each painting. So it got out all the anger in him, but he got it out, but it didn't help him. It made him more wound up. Whereas some of these other artists, and especially in this art group, it did wonders. The same with music, if I may say.
Thank you.
I think I'm sure at start they've done art therapy with groups. I personally have only experienced art in therapy with the groups type of thing. I find it essential, really. It is a way, especially a lot of the elderly clients that we have in the groups, they didn't go to school, they don't express very well with language, they can't write much or read, they have trouble with a complicated concept. So for them to express themselves through art is massive. It's a way of them of turning all this ugly stuff into something beautiful, something that really shows who they are inside. Because their lives, even here, where where people think, oh, they're not at the war anymore, they're here, they're safe, but they're not really, not necessarily. And so it is a way for them to show what's in their heart. And in their hearts, there's a lot of beauty, there's a lot of light. So it comes out through the art. It's a way of celebrating their experiences and their resilience. They're celebrating the fact that they survive, and they survive whole. They still remain themselves. That comes through the art. I think it's very important.
Thank you. There's several more questions, so we'll see if we can address them in the next couple of minutes. From Clara Mojica, are there any differences in the therapeutic approaches used with an elderly veteran of war who suffers PTSD compared with a Holocaust survivor who deals with a similar trauma?
I don't actually have a good answer to this one. When I think, a war could go on for an extended time. The losses could be extensive. The different traumas could also exist. I think that the difference that would have to always be looked at. So the Holocaust for the Jewish people was an intentional effort to exterminate a whole people. And there was no control at all, where possibly if you go into war, unless you're enlisted, if you're a voluntary soldier, it's something you've decided to do, and you're doing it for a purpose. In the Holocaust, there was no real purpose. I don't even know if I'm on track with this. It's just thoughts that are going through my head. So all of those things might be differences in working therapeutically with those people.
Thank you. And certainly, look, one of the things that I'd like to add is that one of the reasons why we've approached these from a more experiential perspective is because there is actually very little done, but particularly in the comparative studies that I know, comparing different types of survivors that are dealing with the confluence of trauma and the aging process. It's actually, particularly comparing different types of trauma, which is, I suppose, a comment on where we tend to put our emphasis, because we're certainly talking about a very large group of people that being affected by both these processes. Let's see if we can get to the next question, which is, I'm interested to know, if you have worked with any third generation survivors of the generational transfer of trauma.
So I have worked with a third generation in their roles more as often the carers and as young as they are of grandparents living with dementia. So we have a family group who, and people who work in trauma who would work with them. So no, I haven't really worked on their trauma, no.
Yeah, we do at START. We see the children and grandchildren of refugees. And we can say we work with that generational PTSD, like you said, Simran.
And I think there's a whole other clinical masterclass. There's a lot of complexities, and there's a bit more research that has been done on transgenerational trauma, both in terms of perigenetic and experiential. So it's probably another one that we need to tackle at some point. Any thoughts on EMDR with older survivors? There's a couple of questions that address that.
I haven't.
So no.
Yeah, and look, we are working in it. I think it's an area where we still have a lot to explore and a lot to learn, and I think this is why we wanted very much to start exploring this issue in a clinical masterclasses, and I guarantee that's not going to be the last clinical masterclass focusing on this interface. It's 8:01, so we'll need to finish now. It's a pity because it's more very interesting questions. But before we finish, I'd like to thank both the speakers for the wonderful presentations and the answers during this panel. There's several more, so I'm sure we could keep talking for a while yet.